in the response to the Capitol Hill storming and the Black Lives Matter protests. But there is clear evidence that we have seen of explicit racism and bias within the police force. Why has this not been addressed, specifically within the Capitol Police?
This is nothing new, right? Like, we have a history in this country of police who are white supremacists. And so anyone who is shocked or surprised is either has amnesia or has dismissed history or has been miseducated. Because if we look at our history, police and law enforcement were started as part of slave patrols to make sure that enslaved people were captured. Then if we move through Reconstruction, slavery, and through Jim Crow and the Civil Rights Movement, racists and white supremacists were always part of police departments, including seeing photos of some law enforcement standing at public lynchings. And so now here we are in the midst of an insurrection, and so where we see police participating in it. So we shouldn't be shocked, and we shouldn't say that they infiltrated. It is that they have always been part of the fabric of the apparatus of law enforcement in this country.
So Captain Pruitt, you have retired Lieutenant Frank Adams, who has said that he's endured constant discrimination, blaming Congress for not listening to Black members of the force, saying that they ignore racism. We have talked a lot about police brutality, especially towards young Black men and women in this country. What we don't address is discrimination and racism inside of the police force. How do you go about addressing both of those and understanding that they can simultaneously exist?
Well, I would like to augment what my sister Judith just says. Just imagine this, though. If bias and discrimination against Black officers in particular is happening inside of police departments, then of course officers are going to feel comfortable going out on the road, going out in the streets, going out into our communities and acting in the exact same way. The Black community is very familiar with aggression and violence that comes with the oppression of our Black bodies and our minds. And so look at how the term law and order is being used as this sort of dog whistle for presidential candidates, for instance, Democrat and Republican, Nixon and Clinton. It's a rallying cry for white supremacy. And if you have police officers who are sympathizers, okay, then it would follow that white supremacy and white nationalism cannot really exist and be successful without the participation of these officers.
So, Waj, you have this new report, and we talked about it a little bit earlier on in the show in the 3 p.m. hour with Janelle, a reporter from NBC, who reported on a story in which so many of the folks that are being arrested, the people, the rioters that are being arrested, were from military, that you had law enforcement officers, former law enforcement officers. I spoke to a former law enforcement officer who now identifies himself as militia. These are people that are on board with this right-wing extremist mentality, with white supremacists and so on and so forth, and they were part of the storming of the Capitol. If you are a Black or brown kid watching this happen, what are you supposed to think when you realize you have members of the military, people that are supposed to serve and protect, members of the police force, people that are supposed to serve and protect, and you may already have, you know, reservations about being able to trust these people, but then seeing them being involved in the storming of the Capitol, what are you supposed to make of it?
You're supposed to listen to Rage Against the Machine, who called it 25 years ago and said some of those who work forces are the same that burn crosses. This is part and parcel of American history. This is white supremacy. We're witnessing the audacity of caucasity, Yasmin, right? Where we literally see a violent, mostly white mob launch an insurrection, try to disrupt an election, and literally law enforcement, whose job is to protect the rest of us, are taking selfies with them, are helping them, are part and parcel of this violent mob that wants to disrupt the election, that wants to help Donald Trump in his violent coup. And what it shows you, if you're a black and brown person, is law enforcement is there to protect and serve whiteness. But if you're a black and brown in this country, you're on your own. In fact, if you're just trying to protest peacefully against police officers killing black and brown bodies in this country, they're going to unleash hell on you. And we just saw in the first week of June, they literally brought batons, tear gases, rubber bullets against Ali Velshi. They beat up black and brown people and white allies who were just on the street saying, please stop killing us. We are American citizens who want equal standards. But if you're white and you're angry and you have economic anxiety and want to literally take part in a violent insurrection, guess what? Not only will we take selfies with you, we'll join you and be part of the mob to intimidate the rest of you to stay in line, because this is a white man's country. And you better believe we're not going to give up power easily. We have to call it out, we have to confront it, and we have to clean it up.
Can I add to that, Yasmin?
Yes, please.
I also think that what black and brown young people and some of us who are not very young think in this moment is exactly what people have been saying in the streets during this time when they're protesting to protect Black lives, which is to divest from law enforcement, because we cannot continue to have law enforcement in this country that not only has a disparate way of treating us, but then also want to partake in overthrowing the government. Like, it calls into question the legitimacy of law enforcement. And so we shouldn't be surprised when people are saying it's time to divest, it's time to defund, and that we need something that is drastically different to protect us.
Even when you're hearing most of the time when folks are saying defund the police, what they mean more is just take some money away from the police and put it more towards programs that actually need it, like the homeless system here in New York City, that gets a fraction of what the police department here in New York City actually operates on. Captain Pruitt, I wonder, you know, we talked about some of the programs that then Attorney General Eric Holder put into place in order to deal with the problems with racism inside of police departments and police brutality towards black and brown men and women in this country. And some of it was rooting out racism, right? Racial sensitivity training, community policing, so on and so forth. The idea is, and the understanding is, will the Biden administration put these types of programs back into place to address what is happening with police departments across this country? Do you think programs like that work?
I'm going to probably be a little bit controversial here. Policy and training are destroyed by the police blue culture. You can train someone all you want to. If they don't wish to embrace it, it's not going to work. We have implicit bias training. Well, this bias is not implicit. It is complicit and it's explicit. So how do you divest yourself of that kind of person in your police department? First of all, they should never be hired, but there are no mechanisms in place to keep that from happening, at least not nationwide. You cannot heal without acknowledgement, and you can't have a reckoning without accountability. So it's great. We can have another commission, and we can have another task force. We have all of the answers about what's wrong. What we lack is commitment in this country. And I mean commitment on all levels, from the highest of the politicians right down to law enforcement leadership and local politicians. Where is the commitment? The people are telling police departments and law enforcement, this is what we want. And that is who law enforcement works for, and they should listen.
Yasmin, can I add something real quick? We know about
yes,
this.
Watch, please.
We know about this. FBI did a report released over a decade ago that said white supremacists have infiltrated law enforcement throughout the country. So why have we waited 10 years? When people of color were whining and complaining, that's what they said, we whine and complain about this. We've been talking about this for years. How come no one took it seriously? How come they ignored black officers who literally were complaining about racism against, that they were facing against their own peers? And so we have to step up. And when everyone says Blue Lives Matters, a cop was killed. Where is Blue Lives Matter when a white mob kills a cop? So enough of this. Let's confront it. Let's call it out. Let's do an audit, and let's clean up house.
Such a good conversation once again. Thank you, guys. Judith Browne Dianis, Captain Sonia Pruitt, Wajahat Ali. Thank you all. Really appreciate it. Hope we can continue it. This news cycle, guys, has been dominated by the insurrection at the Capitol.